JeremyNickel thrives at the intersection of spirituality and technology. In 2017, he launched Evolver, that's spelled EVOLVR. It's a VR space that has led over 1,500 meditation events for more than 40,000 people.
Hi there, I'm Cameron Trimble, CEO of Convergence, and I am here with JeremyNickel, who has been a colleague and a friend for now a lot of years, and I think is doing one of the is one of the great pioneers of particularly virtual experimentation with congregational life in the world today. And it's been a really good teacher for me in how this world is developing. So, Jeremy, you and I met when you were starting this organization called Evolver. Tell us about your journey into that organization, and then the incredibly exciting news that has just become true in your life.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister, and I was moving towards that call slowly and with trepidation for a long time, because as much as I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist since I was a kid, as much as I love that tradition, it's also felt like a cage at times. I think a lot of people outside of Unitarian Universalism just think we're the most, forward-thinking, progressive weirdo group that there is. But quite honestly, when I was leading a congregation, I was expected to lead Sunday worship in a way that looked a whole lot like worship services that had been happening for hundreds of years, hymn sandwich kind of thing. Theologically, people were expecting certain kinds of conversations, and I was expected to be in a pretty traditional role as the minister, teacher, preacher, pastoral caregiver. And I love all those roles, don't get me wrong. It just felt like I didn't have enough room to truly do the things that I wanted to do and to create the community that I wanted to make. And so I've also had a love for technology my whole life, and never quite been clear on how I can bring the spirituality, the spiritual community builder of me and the technology lover of me together. In 2016, maybe late 2015, I helped my brother-in-law out with a project that involved the new generation of virtual reality equipment. It's kind of been a promise for like decades that we were almost to usable VR stuff, and it just never quite delivered. Sometime in the last 6 or 7 years, thanks to some equipment by HTC, the Vive, by Oculus, they have now given us the Quest. The ability for people, just a general human being with just a few $100 extra to burn to get into VR, has become real, and the technology is amazing. And just being in there a couple times, I realized when people are in VR, they feel like they're together. So I'm doing this interview with you, Cameron, on Zoom. It's nice to see you. It's great, but it's not like we're together. It's not like our bodies are physically in the same space, and that feels more intimate, and it adds vulnerability and possibility to the mix that I think are pretty essential to spiritual community that Zoom, for instance, just doesn't provide. In VR, although it's not your body, it's an avatar that you've created that you're kind of looking out of the eyes at. You feel like it's your body. I mean, is this really my body? I don't know. I've decided it is. The same thing happens in VR. You decide that's your body. And quickly, we started with meditation, because I've always felt that was, in our time in planet Earth, the most acceptable in popular culture in terms of spiritual practices. And it took off from the start. I mean, everyone in the world knows they should be meditating. Everyone has caught on to that fact. But most people don't know how to get started, or they're intimidated to even try. And when you're just kind of tripping through VR looking for fun experiences, and you find out there's this group of real people who are meeting and gathering and practicing together, and I can just slip that in between my VR play, it becomes pretty attractive. And so we grew pretty fast, not just doing meditations. That's where we started, but we've added all kinds of spiritual technology sessions to our meetings. The most popular probably is a conversation we do every week called Death Q&A, where we just talk about death, people we know who are dying, our grief process, ways that we, keep moving on. And people need this stuff, obviously, desperately. So the big news is, we were looking how to take our community to the next step, and we were match made with a really amazing VR app called Trip. And Trip is a meditation app that for a couple of years has been growing in popularity. Their sessions are very different than ours. Ours, like I said, include living people, real people and avatars that you interact with, and a real live session leader who's leading you through the session. The Trip app is completely a canned experience. You're solo in it, but it is amazing what they can do in there. You can be interacting with all kinds of different animations around you. They're gorgeous, and that are kind of using your brain focus to order them, to kind of bring your brain into more order. They have just created meditation exercises in there that are next level, otherworldly things. And so we've come together now as one family, where my community Evolver is going to kind of be the live living Sangha community of the Trip app. And it's really exciting. We have a lot of new possibilities ahead of us.
I remember when we were first talking about this possibility, it was an extraordinary evolution in the way that this technology is evolving, but it has, I think we both spotted major impacts on how spirituality is increasingly being shaped for people and the opportunities they've got. I am curious, did Trip come to you because they sensed that a key part of the development of a human is the community aspect of it? So as we're thinking about how people are formed developmentally, were they spotting that? Was that the attraction?
Yeah, so we were match made. So they didn't just come to me. Someone who knew, who could see something we couldn't see, brought us together. But yeah, I think that is exactly right. It's not just the Trip is waking up to that fact, but the VR industry in general is realizing that as much as it's amazing to be immersed in other worlds, the real killer thing that VR can do is put you in relationship with people from other parts of the world, from other walks of life, from places you would just not normally be in communication with. And so in general, VR is realizing that social is the future of this technology. And so I think they saw us as a great way to, jumpstart their movement into that part of VR.
Most of the people who are listening to us right now are members of congregations or leading congregations, and they've just been probably forced is the right word, to jump into putting their services online because of this pandemic, right? And so they're just getting used to this kind of communication, Zoom, or they're putting their worship services up on YouTube and running into the reality that something designed for an online space or an in-person space is not immediately translatable into online, that these are different platforms, different spaces and ways of being. I mean, you're in an entirely different world in a sense, because you're like, I'm imagining people, with our goggles on, and we're showing up into this space that you're curating. And it seems like a big leap from the congregations that are currently trying to just get their things online to then this. Is it a big leap, or how do you see these worlds connecting or not? Or,
Yeah, there's a lot in that, Cameron. It's a really good question. I think, first of all, I'd say, like, not everyone is made to be suddenly leading their services in virtual reality. It is, a real learning curve, and there's a lot of technology to it. And you don't, just like you said, you don't want to do the exact same liturgy in Zoom that you would do in real life. You don't want to do the same liturgy in VR. There's a lot of experimenting and change. I mean, if you were going to preach on a certain Bible text this week, you could create the world that Bible text happened in, and you could walk around and talk about that world rather than telling the story in a new way or whatever. So yeah, there's endless possibility there. But it is different, and it's not going to work for everyone. And I think there's just a lot of a lot of transformation that has to happen from one to the other. Once you've made that switch, it's like that improv exercise, yes, and, in that we can do all the stuff that we did in real life, in congregational life, and so much more. So we still have that important, like, look each other in the eye, know that there's real people here hearing you and they're in it with you. But then, like I said, we can build a new world every week if we want to. You talk about, like, oh no, we have 20 new members. How are we going to fit them in the sanctuary? Not a problem, And I think, even though every minister, imam, rabbi, spiritual leader knows that the building isn't the church, temple, mosque, synagogue, it's so easy, even though you know that, to pretend that it is and to fall into the trap of serving that building and how much energy goes into perpetuating that building. It's like the exact opposite for us. We have no illusion that a physical space has anything to do with who we are as a community. It's what we do together. It's the way that we interact with each other. It's the love we put back into the world. That's our spiritual community. So I think a lot of the stuff that gets in your way in a physical, congregational setting, it doesn't even exist there to trip you up. There's new things, of course, that can get in your way. But we can just keep moving and creating and iterating and trying new things endlessly. And to me, that's extremely powerful.
So the topic of this online summit is a wondering about the future of spirituality. And what I'm hearing in this conversation, and I want to just ask flat out, like, what do you think when you see the future of spirituality? And I want to flag for us both. I'm hearing this undercurrent of, the kind of core formation work that has always defined spiritual growth is still in place. So, community and connection, intellectual deepening, or spiritual, curiosity, and the ancient texts, all of that stuff can still be present. The practices still present. It's just how they're embodied, how they're lived out. That's maybe a shift, and that may be oversimplifying. So let me stop talking. When you think about the future of spirituality, what is obvious to you, maybe not to the rest of us, that we could keep our eyes on? And, are some of the ancient foundations still holding?
Look, I think you would agree with this, that whether you call yourself an atheist or an agnostic or a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Christian or a Methodist versus a Lutheran, a lot of these terms are still identities people want to be connected with, but they're not the physical places they're being able to interact with the questions that every single person wakes up with every day. Why am I here? What's going to happen when I die? How should I treat other people? There's like 3 or 4 that every single one of us, no matter what label or identity you put on yourself, we carry. And in my lifetime, so I'm 46 years old, born in 1976, most of the people I know my age or younger, or even 20 or 30 years older than me, they don't know where to interact with people who want to have those conversations. They don't know where to get resources to think through these ideas. They don't know how to be held accountable when they have bad ideas, unhealthy theology that they're living or espousing. They don't have anyone to correct them on that or to bring them back into a healthy relationship, because those places that they would have done that 100 years ago have lost, any connection to the moral foundation that they think needs to be there to get those resources, those teachings, those relationships. So for me, we've been in a reset for a generation or more. People will go into their local yoga studio now, their local meditation community. They'll go to their Zumba class, or, there's so many little communities where people are getting little pieces of that. And maybe they're trying to stitch them together to have some kind of whole spiritual life, but it's just like, you're always trying to find new pieces and it's impossible. And so my hope for the future of spirituality, of spiritual practice, of spiritual community, is that I'm not the only one at all out there right now recreating what spiritual community can look like, so that all those people, no matter what identities they carry, can come back into community and do these things with each other. So in some ways, I think the future looks a lot like the past. It's just new formulations, right? Like, I do believe that all the wisdom from the past is every bit as important as it ever was. It's just we need to find new spaces, new homes that people will, accept as the place where they could find what they need. So I think, yes, things like VR or AR and XR, which are kind of the next extensions of that technology, where you don't have to have the whole world leave you, but you can kind of bring in distinct pieces. They'll help us build those communities, but I think there will never be a time when we don't have in real life important, essential spiritual communities for us. We're just in this massive, it's hard to see when you're living through it, but I think, 100 years from now, we'll see that this was an extremely generative time period for helping to redefine what spiritual community looks like.
I'm thinking about the Evolver community. Are these folks who are, have they had relationship with religious institutions? Are they wounded from those? Are they just not interested in those? Or what kind of people have been attracted or pulled into this VR community that you've built?
Certainly a lot of wounded people. We got that in the Unitarian Universalist congregation as well, a lot of ex-Catholics. In this community, there are a number of people who have been wounded by Buddhist communities, which can, have their own kind of toxicity to them at times. But yeah, a ton of people who just don't even want to normally talk about spirituality or religion. So, we began the project with the name Sacred VR. And just about the time that I was joining your network to, house this project, we changed our name to Sacred VR, to Evolver from Sacred VR, because after a listening campaign, we really heard from people that the name itself, with its, spiritual / religious connections, was a stumbling block. So, there are a lot of people who have found us as Evolver who literally would never have come just if the name had been Sacred VR. They have no interest in being part of anything that is even a little bit non-secular. So that's a real part of what's going on out there too.
Yep. And then there's also another example of, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the pastor's name, but he went full throttle into church language. So there's right. VR church.
There is VR church for those who want to really be a part of a Christian community. And I'll also say it's as close to a UU church as any Christian church you're going to find. And I mean that as the greatest compliment, in that if you showed up at their Sunday service as a avowed atheist, they don't care. They really don't. And they're not going to try to proselytize Jesus Christ to you either. They literally just want you to be there and share their, beautiful experience and talk about why you love the world and how you can do a better job of it. So they are a Christian community, but I think one of the main reasons they're thriving in VR is that it's the most open-hearted, widest circle Christian community I've ever seen. And you pick up on that immediately.
One of the themes that's emerging in these conversations in this summit is that maybe the most core basic need that people are experiencing and needing met is a need to belong, to be connected, to be safe in community. Yeah. And it's in the way that you're talking about that, that kind of radical openness, it seems like that they've hit upon it. That's the need, that we just need to show up as who we are, however we are.
And I'm glad you said that. This is a really important point that I almost forgot, which is people in church are fake a lot. And I know we don't like to talk about that, but they show up to church and they think they need to be their church self. I'm happy, I'm positive, everything's okay, which is the opposite of I think what we really need from that community, right? And I experienced that in my UU congregation plenty. None of us are immune to that. In VR, when people show up, there's none of that. It's you can, and I assumed that because people were in a made up avatar that they would be fake at first, that you would be the ideal person you wanted to pretend you were, or a total different identity you always wanted to try on. And I'm sure some people do that, but the vast majority of people, not just who come to our session, but that I meet in any VR space, are willing to be extremely vulnerable and real with you, because it's that mix of, I have a body, I'm really here with you, but I'm not going to see you at school or work or when I'm at the supermarket, So there's anonymity and there's realness at the same time, and it's a heady mix, and it allows people in our sessions to just get to the stuff they maybe wouldn't even confess to their best friend or spouse or whatever. They just put it out there and we can talk about it, and it's amazing. I've seen transformative conversations happen at every event I've ever been at in ways that you work to get to for months with someone in real life,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I suppose in that space, those relationships can't ever be weaponized.
I think that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
There's never going to be at least not in its current iteration, a consequence for actually telling the truth about who you are, about the reality of what you're experiencing in the same way.
Absolutely part of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. As you're moving into this next phase of the work, which will unquestionably be scaled beyond either of our wildest imaginations, I am wondering, and you're early in it, so this may not even be a fair question, and we'll talk again 6 months from now and see where you are. But I would imagine there are some interesting kind of theological questions that this space invites that maybe, traditional mainline hasn't engaged in a long time or ever. And as I'm thinking about the future of spirituality, I'm thinking, is there a kind of theological work that needs to be happening as we're evolving forward? So I don't know. Are there big questions that have guided you that you've been experimenting with and playing with?
Yeah, I mean, it's rich ground for like 1,000 PhD students to get in here and start, working on theses, because there's so much to play with. Who are you? Am I here really? Are we together? And what's the difference there? With the energy that you feel like maybe is crackling in the room in real life when you meditate with people versus in VR. It really makes you think a lot about our bodies,
right,
physical locations and relationships in that sense. We have this monthly gathering where we really put a lot of energy into creating rituals that are extremely powerful, but not possible in real life. So an example is when we were doing an intention setting service, everyone was meditating, eyes closed. They imagined an intention for the year, and they had their hands out in front of them, and they grew a crystal in their mind. Not really. They were imagining a crystal growing in their hand that was that intention. When the meditation ended and they opened their eyes, we then rained crystals down from above them, and they could pick one up that called to them, that was their crystal, and hold it in their hand for real. And then when it was their turn, they could walk over to this little pond, and they could say to the whole group, my intention for this year is to finally stop smoking cigarettes, or whatever it was. Drop their crystal into that water, and then fire shot up 100 feet into the air. It was extremely powerful. It was like, it blew people's mind. So then the question starts to be like, what's the line between magic, illusion, manipulation, and ritual? Mm-hmm. So, I think about like in the past, like all these like sham people running around, like pretending to cure ailments and, make things disappear or whatever with fake magic, where they were really trying to trick people, to make them think I'm a healer, I'm a prophet or whatever. We can do stuff much cooler than they could ever do. But I think we're really clear, like, this isn't magic, it's science, right? It's like amazing nerd people who are our heroes have put ones and zeros in an order to allow us to do this. Yeah. And we can unlock these really powerful things, but there's a line there, and we're still figuring out what it is and how to be really upfront with, like, we're doing these powerful things, but we know, right? It's science. It's not magic. It's not, like God is making that fire shoot up into the air. We did that. Alan, my amazing world designer, did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we call him our world builder. There's some theological implications in that. He is our world builder. What does that even mean? So yeah, there's so much to chew on here, Cameron. If I was back in seminary or grad school right now, I would be really excited to dig in just intellectually on what's going on here.
If you could think of one, or if one word or phrase comes to mind that you think the church could focus on as it's thinking about the future of spirituality, what comes to you?
Hypocrisy. I think getting more in line with your values than you are. I just think, anyone who is under the age of 60 is super brand savvy at this point, and they're not going to connect themselves with brands that they think aren't completely in line with their values. And for better or for worse, right or wrong, Christianity as a brand, large, and most denominations at a smaller microcosm level have some pretty tough stuff connected to their brand at this point.
Right.
And so, I think some radical changes need to be made to signal to people like, we're not living for money and power and any of that stuff. We are here to help people grow spiritually, period. Mm-hmm. And, I just look at the Catholic Church, all those buildings, all the money, all that, stuff they've got sitting around, if they sold it all tomorrow and gave it all to the hunger program of the world, to me, I would go back to a Catholic church the next day after they did that. But until they do something at that level to redefine who they are and what they stand for, they're going to have a tough time attracting people who are, not at the end of their life right now, I think.
So that invites an interesting question, because in VR world, we come together with our avatars, and we I've experienced this too with being with you in that space. There is a vulnerability to it, a real deepening. If you want that in your life, it's available there. But then what action is called forth? So how does it translate from that experience to then making this world a better place?
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm a big believer in like fix your backyard. That you, wherever you are, have something right near you that needs your love and attention to make it better. And that if every single person did that, we'd be okay. So we really talk about turning love into action in our lives a lot. But we are removed from the real world at some level. So how much that actually can return, it's hard to tell. This is a stepping stone in the technology. And one term people are more familiar with than XR is AR, or augmented reality. Most people had some taste of that with Pokemon Go, where they would take their smartphone and they would look through it at the real world just as the real world was, but it would add a little animal in there that they could catch.
Right.
The future of VR is more like that, where you have some contact lenses in, or some just, maybe like your grandma's 70 flared lenses, glasses that were so cool. Got those on. You see the whole world around you, but you can now just bring your meditation leader, your meditation group in as holograms to sit in the space where you are, and we'll more be able to be in the world together. Mm-hmm. So Trip is working with Niantic Games, who made Pokemon Go, and we're building a meditation app in AR where you will be able to, in the next year or so, not distant future, go to a local park, load up your friends in real time, and me as your meditation leader or whatever. And now you're in your park, you're seeing the trees and the birds and hearing them, and all the real world is still there. You've just brought us into it. So that's the next step. Now we're in the real world together. It will get better to the point where we can really affect the real world together. We can make changes. We can have activities where we show up embodied together. So all the things that I think, like I said before, it's a yes and I hope. We're going to be able to do the things we can uniquely do in VR, but in time, we're going to bring in all that real life activity as well.
My mind has just gone with possibilities of this,
yeah.
both good and ill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it matters. And it's why, in fact, I'm so encouraged about this progression of your career in your ministry there, because it matters that good people with strong ethics and good intention are the drivers of the agendas behind these technologies. So
Well, I agree. And sometimes I even think I'm one of those people for a moment. So I hope that's true. And I think the real point is, yes, this technology will be used in all the ways, right? I mean, the military is all over this stuff. You know, they're going to be doing terrible things with this technology. So it's really important that not just me, but lots of you out there come and figure out how to do good with this stuff too. Because you're absolutely right. All tech is neutral, you know, and we bring ourselves to it. And we need a lot of good people coming in here and doing great with it.
Yep. Okay. So let's go there. How do people get started with this? I mean, you know, for me, I went at your urging, went and bought the Oculus and spend, you know, time with my hand, what are those called?
The little controllers. Yeah.
Controllers. That's it. Is that what we should do? Like, should people just start tuning in?
Yeah, I mean, I hate saying yes only because that product that you're talking about is owned by Meta, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who, you know, isn't the person I'd like to be supporting. The good news is they sell those headsets at a loss right now. So you're actually taking a little bit of money out of their pocket every time you buy some. So there's at least a little reframe. But yeah, the best way to get into virtual reality right now is to buy a Quest, an Oculus Quest. It's about $300, $350. It's completely a standalone piece of equipment, meaning you don't need a computer to run it. It connects to your Wi-Fi and it does everything it needs to in the goggles. The main platform that my community uses is called AltSpace VR. It's owned by Microsoft. For the time being, at least still, it's completely free. All of our events there are free to attend. So I would say come, you know, go to the Oculus store on your goggles, add AltSpace VR and start looking for some Evolver events to check out. But even more so, once you've done that, start thinking about what you should be doing in VR, because it's the Wild West still. There's so much possibility in terms of creating new models of doing whatever it is you do in real life in there. And there's an audience for it. So yeah, I would say the best thing to do is just get started.
Excellent. I'm curious about that. So let's say that we've got our headset, we're bought in, we want to start playing in that space. How do you even start? Like are there tutorials or?
Yeah, so most
find a YouTube video. What do you do?
Yeah, that's actually a great example too. You can always find a good YouTube video to help you, but most VR apps, and AltSpace VR is one of them, when you first log in and set up your account, it puts you through kind of like a tutorial that teaches you how to move around and interact and find stuff on the menu. So there's some teaching usually at the beginning of every app, but then also, like for instance, in AltSpace, the community is so supportive. They want people to come and join. So people offer free sessions called AltSpace 101 pretty much every day, where it's really just like, come and learn how to do stuff here, and they'll answer all your questions. And most of the VR apps that are social based, like that one, have creator communities in them, just tons of people who've been attracted to them because they want to figure it out, and they're extremely supportive. So anyone you dive into, you should be able to start finding helpful people to figure it all out.
Excellent. Okay, so our homework is, as we're architecting the future of spirituality, go play in VR space.
Yes, absolutely.
So Jeremy, it's been great to talk to you, to learn from you. We will check in again 6 months from now and see how this is all evolving. But thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I love these conversations and look forward to whatever there is between now and 6 months to talk about.